Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here today. We're so happy to see you. Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Carrie Schmidt of Plentiful Philanthropy. I'm also proud to be a lifetime member of CMC and serve on the Board of Trustees. And we're grateful to the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch for presenting today's live stream, which is being carried out on all of CMC's social media platforms. So let's thank those who have chosen to support the Columbus Metropolitan Club. All right, now for today's conversation. I'm really excited to hear how this conversation goes today. De-globalization and Made in the USA drive is causing a stunning reversal of the long decline of US-based manufacturing. And nowhere is that reversal more visible than here in Central Ohio. The vast scale of new investment is being called the manufacturing supercycle. It's transforming Rust Belt states like ours into breeding grounds for new high-tech factory jobs that will require entirely new workforce and skills. Today, we're excited to hear from our panel about Ohio's return to its role as a global manufacturing leader and the challenges that lie ahead for us as well. So we'd like to welcome today's guests, Ryan Osberger, the president of the Ohio Manufacturers Association, Dr. Bill Lafayette, owner of Regionomics, Damon Richardson, SVP of Manufacturing, American Nitro, and Daniela Vilasa, Human Resources Director for Costa Fiber. And of course, our host, Doug Buchanan, Editor-in-Chief for Columbus Business First. You can read about today's panelists in your form flyers. I'm just about to throw it to you. And we look forward to today's conversation. All yours.
All right, thank you, Carrie. I'm very excited about this subject as well. We've been writing a lot about manufacturing expansion in Ohio, and we're going to set the stage for you with some background on exactly what is happening, and we're going to start with Bill, who is an economist by trade, and he's going to give us a little bit of what's going on with workforce. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, thank you, Doug, and thank you all. I'm going to kick things off, as Doug says, with a real quick little lay of the land. To summarize what I'm going to tell you, manufacturing is critically important to Ohio's economy. We are holding our own, but there is at least one pretty troubling sign in all this. I'll get to that in a bit. Manufacturing employment has indeed had a turnaround. But that turnaround actually goes back to 2010. That employment growth, the employment growth that we've seen over the last 12 years, followed a decade that was not at all kind to manufacturing workers here or nationally. From the beginning of 2000 through the expansions ending in December 2007, U.S. manufacturing shed 3.5 million workers, a 20% decline. And then came the recession, which cost the nation another 2.3 million jobs. Employment is 1.5 million jobs higher now than it was at the beginning of 2010. Although this gain is obviously nowhere near what the preceding loss was, the 2010s were the first sustained manufacturing employment growth in 20 years. Here in Ohio, manufacturing employment totals nearly 700,000, higher than all states except California and Texas. That point's a little bit misleading, though, because states with bigger economies naturally have higher employment. A better measure of the importance of manufacturing here in Ohio is based on what's called relative concentration, manufacturing share of total employment in Ohio versus the share nationally. Here we rank a still respectable ninth, with half again the manufacturing employment that you would expect in an economy Ohio's size. Ohio manufacturing employment grew faster than average from 2010 through 2019. The pandemic, though, hit Ohio manufacturing employment harder than average. So we are now just a touch lower than where we were in February 2020, while the U.S. is a tiny bit higher. Focusing on manufacturing employment, though, doesn't tell the whole tale, because for decades, the spread of technology has caused manufacturing employment to grow much more slowly than the value of the output that manufacturers produced. We use gross domestic product, or GDP, to measure the value of manufacturing output. Technology was the major reason why manufacturing employment fell during the expansion of the aughts. The widespread belief at the time, for those of you who remember, was a lot of breastfeeding and saying manufacturing jobs are all going overseas, U.S. manufacturing is dying. Although some of that was certainly going on, many of the lost jobs were in fact lost through automation. If offshoring were the main reason for the job loss that we saw in that decade, manufacturing GDP in the U.S. would have fallen. In fact, though, it increased faster than total GDP over those years. Ohio manufacturing GDP in 2022 totaled nearly $130 billion, less than only California, Texas, and Illinois, but only a touch less than Illinois. Our GDP concentration is 40% greater than you would expect in an economy our size. That ranks us 10th. Ohio's GDP growth before COVID was even stronger than the employment growth was. We lost only a little bit more than the national average in 2020, and GDP bounced back faster in Ohio than employment did. While Ohio employment, as I said, is a little bit less than before the pandemic hit, Ohio GDP is 2% higher than before the pandemic hit. I said earlier, I warned you that there is a troubling sign for Ohio manufacturing, though, and it's this. Nationwide, the number of manufacturing plants is 14% higher than it was a decade ago. But the number of manufacturing plants in Ohio is essentially unchanged. That means other states are doing better than we are at attracting expansions and relocations. Finally, let me touch briefly on what's on all our minds, namely Intel. To be clear, when you put Intel's impact in a statewide context, it's going to be marginal. But that doesn't mean that it's unimportant. It's going to bring in a new growing industry that's going to help diversify Ohio's economy, reduce the cyclicality of manufacturing, and will kick GDP growth into a slightly higher gear. Locally, of course, the impact's going to be much bigger than it is at the state level. Many of Central Ohio's key manufacturing industries are mature. Chip manufacturing, though, is still in growth mode. One of our key industries is automotive and parts manufacturing. I understand that electric cars are less complex than gas-powered cars and take fewer workers to produce. That's why that new battery plant in Jeffersonville and Honda's expansion of its existing plants is so important to the Central Ohio economy. Both that and Intel is going to lead to an increase in employment in Central Ohio rather than what's likely to be a decrease. So that's what I wanted to share. Doug, we're in your hands.
Okay, thank you. Well, count me among those who thought that tech was not the number one reason for that, so I've already learned something from the aughts there, so that's good. Ryan, you have some things you wanted to say as well, and we've got some slides. There we go. All right, Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you, Doug, and thanks to the Columbus Metropolitan Club, especially to the programming committee for highlighting manufacturing today. It's sometimes a quieter but a mighty industry, and so Bill's already touched on that. I'm going to augment what Bill said with some visual aids that we have here on the screen, just to paint the picture of what manufacturing looks like in Ohio. Here's our neighboring states. So Ohio is not a manufacturing state. It is the manufacturing state. The Great Lakes Midwestern region is the heartland of manufacturing in America, and Ohio is the hub of that all. So we are very fortunate. Two measuring sticks. Bill described both of them. Of course, he's an economist. And so we're an advocacy organization. We represent manufacturing companies, about 1,300 of them all across the state. They make everything from great cars to pizza rolls to paints and coatings and so many different products in between. We celebrate manufacturing. We advocate for manufacturing. We serve manufacturers. So we have to measure the health of manufacturing, as Bill just said. So by jobs, Ohio is third largest in the country, and nearly 700,000 jobs. That means about 17% of Ohio's workforce is employed in manufacturing. Central Ohio's somewhat more diverse than other regions of the state, where manufacturing may be more concentrated. But statewide, it's a juggernaut. And of course, with an average payroll of $70,000, these are family-sustaining jobs, great opportunities for people. Next slide measures by GDP. And $134 billion is the updated figure from the most recent quarter. That's $44 billion in growth over the past 10 years. So manufacturing is growing by a third over this last decade. And as Bill said, only California, Texas, and Illinois, just slightly with Illinois, have edged us out. We're confident that with the high-profile investments, Intel, Honda, many other EV and other lesser celebrated economic development news, that we're going to be outpacing Illinois and getting back to our historical #3 ranking by GDP very, very soon. And then next is what is Ohio doing? Given those stats, I think Ohio's situated pretty well for manufacturing. That's our association's stance. Here's a slide to depict what we think is going right in Ohio, and I'll start in the lower right there with the manufacturing legacy. Ohio has been, it is today, and we believe with the foundation and these secret sauce ingredients is going to continue to be manufacturing powerhouse well into the future. But certainly our legacy is a critical part of that. Industry 4.0, as Bill alluded to, technology. So there's innovation in products. How do you make a car better? How do you make an appliance better? How do you make a pizza roll better? That's product innovation. But how do you make them more cost efficient? That's process innovation. That's been happening in Ohio forever. We're really good at productivity. That's our secret ingredient here in Ohio. So now the race is on for Industry 4.0. Looking at our friends at Ohio Manufacturing Extension Partnership State and locally here in Columbus. They're helping manufacturers, particularly small, medium-sized ones, get ready for Industry 4.0, become more productive by using technology to innovate their processes. Governor and Lieutenant Governor cannot be excluded. Their contributions, what they're choosing to invest in, has really mattered. And on the left-hand side, the workforce initiatives, again, MEP, but also our very robust education and training offerings, certainly K through 12, career tech, community colleges, 4 years. It's all part of the solution, and there's greater alignment going on right now, still in the early stages. No state has figured out how to better align than there's a lot of room for improvement, let's just say that. But we're making the right investments decisions. Location, proximity markets, business climate, Jobs Ohio's ability to focus on sort of an industrial policy by having the continuity and expertise. We're seeing some real advantages in the ability to recruit strategically important businesses, especially in the manufacturing sector. And then lastly, it's all about workforce. Biggest crisis is the shortage of available talent into manufacturing. We'll take everybody. We have more jobs available today than we can possibly fill. That is driving automation and robotic investments. That's been going on in manufacturing, though, for 50-plus years. So that's nothing new for manufacturing. But the point is, we want to get more people engaged in manufacturing. These are family-sustaining jobs. MakingOhio.com is a tool that the association put together and is working with our different education partners to promote, to speak to young people about the pathways that are available in manufacturing. And not just young people, but people who are looking to change careers, career changers. So appreciate being here today. Look forward to some questions.
Okay. We are going to come right back to workers and workforce right after we hear from Daniela and Damon about, why don't you just give us a short overview of what you do. Damon, you can start first.
Yes, I'm the Vice President of Manufacturing for a new company that just moved here to Ohio, American Nitrile. We produce nitrile gloves, hand protection. This is an industry actually that was originally based in Ohio. Throughout most of its existence, it started to shift overseas in the 90s. And it's kind of interesting, at the beginning point of my career, I was actually starting my career when this industry was moving out and going overseas. And I'm very happy that I'm now being able to bring that industry back to Ohio, which is actually its home, especially in the northern part of Ohio around the Akron and Coshocton area. It used to be kind of the epicenter of the rubber industry and particularly the disposable gloves. So I'm very honored to be leading that industry coming back to the U.S. And I think the importance of this particular industry was really highlighted in the recent years during the pandemic, when there was a massive shortage of this particular category that was almost shutting down our healthcare system. And our reliance upon critical items like this being manufactured overseas. And strangely, even though we're bringing some manufacturing back here, overall, we're actually in a far worse situation now than we were before the pandemic because of where this industry has shifted. It's pivoted where, at the beginning of the pandemic, 80% of this industry was basically in Malaysia. And since that time, China took the opportunity during the pandemic to really build up this industry really within a couple years, deploy really advanced technology in the manufacturing process. And now, because they're undercutting the Malaysian manufacturers in cost and literally dumping product into the U.S., it shifted basically our buying behavior, where the U.S. only relied upon 10% of our PPE coming from China. Prior to the pandemic, we're now getting 65% of our PPE from China now post-pandemic. And there's a lot of concerns that are related to that. And so I'm happy to at least be part of bringing this industry back and having at least a small portion of it back here in its home state, and looking forward to how that's going to basically create a little bit more robustness for our healthcare system in the future if there ever was another pandemic.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Daniela, we're going from a very young manufacturing facility to an established one.
Yeah. So I'm Daniela. I have worked. We're in the automotive industry. We do heat shield, hood liners, and dashboard for Chrysler, GM, Ford, Toyota, Honda, and others. I'm responsible for HR there. When I joined Acoustic Fiber, I didn't know anything about cars or hood liners or what even was a dashboard, but now I say that I know more than I think. So really, our job is, provide the thermal and acoustical solutions for the automotive industry. Really, my job is to ensure that we have the workforce to produce those parts to our customers. As you know, we have been talking in Ohio. It is a struggle, and we found some different ideas, and we're going to be talking here.
Okay. So, Daniela, how many employees do you have, and how many job openings do you have at the moment?
Sure. In this location in Delaware, we are located in Delaware, we have about 400 employees. We tripled the size since I joined 7 years ago. So now I think we have about 20 to 30 openings on the production associate side.
And if you were able to triple your workforce in that time, where did you find these mysterious workers?
Well, so we all have to be creative. I'll say that we all have before COVID and after COVID. I remember in 2021, we're really struggling to find people. A lot of people left our facility because for higher paid jobs, $25 an hour and all that. So I start trying to call my former employees. to see if they want to come back or
Okay.
to see if they have a friend. So suddenly I was like, okay, one of them said, oh, I'm working in prison, so I'm doing well, getting $30 an hour. I said, okay, so I said, can you come here, let's talk at least. We have a supervision position open. He speaks different language. And he said, oh, no, Sunday I can't, I'm going to go to church. And I said, okay, well, take me to church with you.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. So I was like, okay, I'm not sure what I'm doing, but I'm going to church on Sunday. So I was there, the church was the community from Africa, so a lot of them speak Swahili. So I'm there, singing, dancing, Swahili, English, and all that. So I, trying to think, okay, what I'm doing here, So at the end of the day, I went to my former employee, introduced me to the priest, and introduced to me a couple people in the church. So I met someone there that I thought was really business-oriented. And I was like, wow, maybe he can be in the community and can be bring people.
Yeah.
So called my CEO, he was in France, and I said, oh, I have an idea, I have a crazy idea. I said, okay, Daniela, tell me. I said, well, I met this person, I'd like to bring him in. So he's gonna be in the community recruiting people. I don't need a recruiter that sits behind the desk. I need a recruiter that's go outside. So I say, okay, just hire. I was like, wow, that was easy. So anyway, so we hire, Jimmy, actually he's here. Jimmy, say hi. So he speaks 12 different languages. So we're able to increase our, refugee immigrant community. That's just was not a quick example, but that was just one example. Another, we work with the refugees, Chris, Center of Refugees.
Yeah.
So in 2022, I hired more than 30 Afghanistans that they came to the U.S.
Right.
A lot of them, they didn't drive because they just got here. They didn't have drive license. So I was searching a lot. I was like, oh, how can I bring them to work? So the company absorbed the cost of transportation for 3 months. So they could get up to speed to get the drive license, to buy cars and all that. So this is another big community that we have in our facility. Again, we still struggle in finding people, keeping people, but we just try to find different ways.
Damon, how is your workforce strategy?
It's interesting because prior to coming back here to Ohio to start up this industry, I was actually working overseas. I worked over there for 14 years. So I came back right after the pandemic, and of course, all I was hearing about was labor shortage, labor shortage, labor shortage, and we were starting up this new manufacturing facility, and I was getting very nervous. It's like, are we going to be able to find people? And it was actually a very large concern, and we actually started up operations in November of last year, and we were rather surprised. I mean, I guess, I don't know if we're, a little bit unique or different. We only have a workforce right now about 140 people. That will probably double as we scale up our production. Mm-hmm. But the nature of our process and our technology is, we generally require a little bit more of a skilled workforce. Maintenance is we have very large machines. These require, a lot of technical skill sets. We have a lot of engineers that work in our facility, but even the semi-skilled or the entry-level positions in our facility, we were actually pleasantly surprised that we were able to recruit people very quickly. We actually still have a waiting list of people that we can call on that are waiting to get jobs here. Maybe we can send some your way, but I'm sure that one of the contributing factors of this is I think our package in terms of compensation was probably on the above average range.
Okay.
And we felt that was warranted given the what we were requiring of the employees and it being a little bit more of a higher skilled environment. And we knew that in order for us to be sustainable and exist, I mean, this is probably an important topic. I mean, bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., especially for a product like we make, a lot of the reasons why these industries have shifted overseas is because they could obviously make those products at a much lower cost. And particularly very labor-intensive items have been the ones that have benefited the most from offshoring. But in recent years, this has changed, especially in China. I think we kind of lose sight of what's happening in China. China has very rapidly increased their capacity for innovation. Before, it was like, we told them what to make, and they would make it, they could copy it, they could replicate it, and then they'd find a way to make it really efficiently, make it very cheaply. And we always kind of taught ourselves, well, China's never going to be able to innovate. We're going to continue to control the innovation. They're just going to be our low-cost manufacturing source. And especially over the 5 to 7 years, that's entirely changed. I mean, China now, in certain ways, is out-innovating us, right? And so we've got to be able to bring that back. So part of being able to bring an industry back is being able to be competitive and be cost competitive so that people aren't necessarily having to pay a large premium for products that are made in America. So knowing that, and the reason I'm kind of maybe going off tangent to mention this is because it does relate to the workforce, and that we knew that we were going to continue to have to deploy more and more automation to be competitive. And what we didn't want to do is, in the earlier stages where we were going to have to require more employees, we didn't want to get in a situation where we were going to have to maybe hire people and displace them as we had automation. So we needed to make sure we had a skill force that was a workforce that was able to adapt to the changes that were going to occur in our facility, and we're going to be able to grow, and we want to make sure that they were motivated to do that, and that they seen a career path, because we wanted to give people a career path where it's not, you're not just coming in and you're going to pack gloves. Eventually you're going to be a technician and potentially supervisor, and there was going to be a pathway. And this was something that I think was very exciting, because as a startup company, you had the opportunity for upward mobility. So not only did we offer, I'd say, a very appealing compensation package, we were also, as an entry-level position, people could see that they come in here, and if they worked hard, that they had a career path within a few years rather than kind of being in a stagnant position for a long time. And I think that's one of the key differentiators that's helped us recruit people and kind of have more of a kind of a waiting list situation rather than going out and struggling to find people.
Well, you mentioned it, you're specifically talking about skilled labor and skilled workers. So finding the skills finding people with the skills. I mean, that's kind of the rub. And Bill, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's roughly the same number of open jobs as there are unemployed people. It's just we don't have the match. So are you finding skilled workers, or are you just finding bodies and then skilling them up?
I mean, personally, we have a lot of electricians, welders, plumbers, metal workers. Again, like in our facility, this machine is not kind of like an off-the-shelf machine. It's custom made. It's very bespoke. If something breaks down, it's not like I can order a spare part. We have to fabricate that. So we had to have people with these skill sets here. You know, we have tons of piping that constantly needs to be maintained. So we had to have plumbers. So these trade skills, electricians, plumbers, we actually found that, you know, we didn't have an issue recruiting these people. And like even our maintenance team, we found that we were able to get really high quality people in our facility. So we haven't necessarily had a challenge getting people with the right skill set. And then in many of our positions where we're actually training those people, it really is just a matter of finding people with the willingness to learn. And we've been obviously educating a lot of people in some of the processes we do, such as, you know, compounding and packing, and a lot of things that are not like off-the-shelf standard things that people would have experience in. And we found that, you know, we've had people that have been very receptive to learning the education, learning the skill set. And something very recently that we've partnered with is OPI, which is Ohio Penal Industries, where what we're doing is, you know, they're trying to set up some glove manufacturing within their facility so that they can actually train some of the people in those facilities so that they have a skill set that when they're released that they could potentially be employed. And American Nitrile is very keen to participate in this, because we can go in and we can actually help train these inmates and give them skill sets. And because our organization is growing and we know that these skills that they're learning in there are, I mean, we basically have a turnkey that when they're released, we can hire people that already have the skill sets to do the job. And these inmates who might normally have maybe a challenge getting employed, we're very happy to employ them. So I believe that, you know, this is an innovative way that we've looked at to get some of that more skilled, those people that have more skills already trained and up to speed for when we need them as we continue to expand.
And you're definitely tapping an untapped market. Go ahead, Danielle.
Again, we have found maybe 50% of our maintenance. The other, we are lucky to have a lot of good partners with us in Ohio. One of them is Columbus State. We have a program called MEP that we bring interns here to learn with us and then continue the full time as they provide training as well. There was a time that they brought a welding program to our facilities, so we don't need to go out and learn. Even I weld. So, in case they need a backup.
Okay.
But anyway, I think, Ohio provides so many different partners that help. It has been helping the manufacturing world to get up to speed on their skills.
Okay. Ryan, anything to say on the training side of things, retraining?
Yeah. Upskilling is a term that we use every day, and there's so many different untapped populations we need in manufacturing. Certainly young people, as I mentioned on the slide, Making Ohio is intended to communicate to them and their parents, guidance counselors about those opportunities. But more and more of our members are turning to justice impacted individuals, another word for the formerly incarcerated populations. But there's a number of populations underrepresented in manufacturing. Women underrepresented. Women are 51% of Ohio's workforce, only about 30%, 27% in manufacturing employment. We need to do a better job of educating and attracting women into the manufacturing workforce. Minorities, even more so. Veterans, huge emphasis by Intel on veterans. So what can we be doing at the larger military installations and bases across the country when people are getting out and looking what to do next, right? That's a population. So more and more of these untapped populations, each of them requires its own strategy. We're building some of those in Ohio together with the support, frankly, of Jobs Ohio and the Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation. But then it's up to manufacturers locally to draw down those tools and use them to make a difference and to solve the workforce challenge and improve it in their part of the state.
So how prevalent is the kind of outmoded image of manufacturing as being dirty, disgusting, and dangerous?
Dark, dirty, dangerous perception is out there, but manufacturing has changed so much. I mean, I'm not going to say there aren't still factories that can be a little dark and can be a little dirty, but they're all advanced now. They they had to become more productive. That's what advanced manufacturing is, fancy name, simple concept. You take a factory and you utilize technology to operate the machinery more effectively. Industry 4.0's taking that to the next level. So the machines are talking to each other. They're talking to the ordering system. They're talking to the customer base. It's changing the job. So a steel mill, Ohio's number 2 in the production of steel, and then we use an awful lot of steel and everything that we make that goes into cars, trucks, appliances, so many things in between. Those steel mill plants, many of those mills are decades old. But now you go in and there's an operating room, control room, and it's highly air conditioned, heavily computed. Looks like something out of Star Trek or something. And you got engineers pushing all these buttons and visuals. And that's what manufacturing jobs are like today. Yeah, the production of steel still is indoor lightning, as I describe it, but it's completely different from what it was a generation ago.
Bill, maybe this is a question for you, but do we have enough workers to sustain manufacturing growth? Like, is there some point where companies don't come here or we don't grow as much in this sector as we want to because we just don't have the workers?
Well, that's something that I'm really, really worried about. Here in Ohio, as I'm sure most of you know, you go outside central Ohio, the population is falling. And to be honest, that's probably a major reason why Ohio's manufacturing employment growth isn't better than it is. The real worry that I have is that employers who can't find enough workers here are going to pack up and go someplace else where workforce isn't as big of a problem. And obviously that's a difficult, expensive thing to do, but as we all know, it does happen.
Yeah.
But where would those places exist, I guess, outside of Ohio? Again, maybe I share a little bit, and I kind of have a unique perspective, I guess, because, again, I've lived outside the U.S. up until the last couple of years, and so a lot of what I've been hearing in the media and seeing, when I came here, I found it wasn't necessarily syncing up. I mean, example, in our organization, With OSU being here, again, we require a lot of technical skill sets, a lot of engineers. I mean, we bring on interns from OSU. These guys work there every summer, and now we've actually started hiring them as they've graduated. And we're finding again that, if you go out there and you look and you participate and pay
Yeah.
and participate in the community, that the skill is there and the workers are there. And if you're looking at a manufacturing job that's going to actually require a lot of, manufacturing is requiring fewer and fewer people to do. It's going to require more and more people with advanced skill sets, and that's really the future, right? And so that's what we need to be focused on: is are we generating the right kind of worker for the factory of the future, as you've mentioned with your Industry 4.0, and I think that Ohio is really quite capable of doing that, and maybe to an even better degree than I've seen in other parts of the U.S. So when we say they're going to move to other locations, what are those locations that are doing a better job? And maybe you know that, and I don't. But I find that Ohio seems to be pretty competitive in that area for, I'd say, the factories of the future.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear.
Can I just
Sure, go ahead.
add? I'll say yes and no, because I think you have your big companies, your corporates that has a lot of technology, but also we have your mid-sized company and smaller company that sometimes the process is manual. We don't need the high-skilled workers, but we still need workers. And I would say I live in Brazil, I live in Canada, I live in the US, in Tanzania. I have lived in 4 different countries, and I'll say in Ohio, we still need better transportation. We still need affordable housing. So we still need to continue to have that conversation because it's not all our workers come from OSU. Our workers have cars, our workers have support in their family that has a daycare.
Right.
So we still, I think this conversation is extremely important because we can't forget, other companies that is not high tech, right? But it still provides, job and a salary to put food on the table for their families.
Yeah, hallelujah to that. We're going to move to questions from our live stream and in-person audiences in just a moment. So if you have a question, please make your way to the microphone at the back now. And if you're watching online, please type your questions into the chat. Before we take audience questions, let me ask another question. Brian and maybe Bill, I want to talk about industrial policy. So the CHIPS Act incentivizes superconductors, and the Inflation Reduction Act incentivizes electronic vehicles and things like that. I feel like if governments were subsidizing industries in other countries, we would criticize that. So why do you support that, and why? We'll start with Ryan.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. Industrial policy, we work mostly at the state government level, but federal government has much greater scale and ability to influence an industrial policy. Our take is the United States has generally not had an industrial policy. It's been a laissez-faire approach. And so we're seeing in these recent laws that was just mentioned in CHIPS Act and in the Inflation Reduction Act, also the transportation package. Manufacturers win when there's transportation because we make all the products that go into the road and bridges, and we benefit from good transportation where we can put some raw materials and finished products. So those are of benefit. There are plenty of other countries around the world that have a very aggressive industrial policy that calls for subsidizing their manufacturing so that they can attract more manufacturing. That's been happening in our lifetime, and many of our member companies go to the International Trade Commission and file disputes against that type of a thing. Right. Ohio stands to benefit from these packages right now. I am not an expert in international trade, but that is kind of the conundrum, right, is how much is a plan versus unfair subsidies.
Yeah.
Well, at the national level, these acts are really a way to inject national security concerns into site selection decisions. It's an attempt to get producers to prioritize industries whose overseas locations pose problems of one sort or another. But really, it's like a local tax incentive in the sense that whether the incentives are really needed or not is unknowable. We do not know whether the Intel plant would be moving in up the street if the CHIPS Act had not been enacted. It's certainly a very strong incentive of Intel to convince us that it was, in fact, essential. And it may have been, but it may have not been. We simply do not know and cannot know.
Bottom line, we got the project. So
We got the project, and that is a good thing.
But to
worked
the
out for
point
us.
that's already been mentioned, I mean, we are competing with countries that have manufacturing strategies, right? At the central government level, right? And they are driving the desired outcome, and they are seeing the big picture. And I think, unfortunately, as unpopular as this might sound, we tend to take things on a very short-term window, right? And we're competing with countries that are viewing things with a longer horizon. So to me, these type of initiatives and incentives are needed to compete with that type of a national strategy, national manufacturing strategy. We need a national manufacturing strategy, and that will involve, by necessity, probably subsidies or incentives to get industries that would not normally be looking at it from a purely economical level.
Right.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed. But really, it's the long term that a manufacturer is going to focus on.
Right.
The incentive is all well and good, but can they be efficient and productive in the long run?
Well, it's CMC's longstanding tradition to take questions, and Sophia Pfiffner with CMC is curating questions from today's live stream. You can still join her at the microphone. Out of respect for others, please keep your questions brief, to the point, and please keep in mind that questions end with a question mark. Sophia, what is our first question?
They sure do. So this question is from Kathy Ann Kowalski with Energy News Network and I in Ohio. What types of manufacturing would substantially provide more jobs as part of, well, let me edit this. What types of manufacturing would provide a substantial number of jobs for parts of southeastern Ohio that lost a large number of jobs in coal, steel, and aluminum?
Well, that's something that I've been thinking about. I did a lot of work with the regional campuses of Ohio University a few years ago. And the problem with Southeast Ohio is probably, to a large extent, the terrain. You cannot build a large manufacturing plant as easily there as you can in northwestern Ohio, which is very, very flat. So there are, I'm trying to remember this number, but I want to say there are 40 or 50% of all manufacturing plants in the U.S. that employ fewer than 10 people. And there is a real opportunity for entrepreneurial manufacturing, much more than you would think. And that probably is where the opportunities lie.
Okay. Mindy?
Mindy Wright, member of the program committee, so thanks a lot for doing such a great job. In an article about differences between generations, the 538 website recently noted, quote, according to our survey and others, voters aged 18 to 29 are more likely than any other cohort to say that abortion should always be legal, that racism and racial inequality are big problems in the U.S., and that sexism and gender inequality is also a big problem. How concerned are you about the legislature's growing passage of laws that make Ohio less welcoming or attractive to workers in this age group?
Brian?
As an advocacy organization, I think I get that one. Yeah, so I think the question is related to the upcoming state issue 1, which has to do with altering Ohio's constitutional amendment process. And of course, there's a likely constitutional amendment having to do with women's reproductive rights right behind that in November. So the two are very closely linked right now. Our association, we have members on different sides of this. We have members that are concerned about the Constitution being over-amended, and that has been abused by some different groups. I would agree with over the years. At the same time, we have members who are looking at this as a workforce issue and attractiveness to work, and women's rights are important. And as I said earlier, if we as an industry want to be open to all populations, we have to be more attuned to those different things. Our association has chosen not to take a position on that, so we do not view that as a business issue.
Anybody else? Okay. Next.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to come speak today. My name is Brian. I'm with JP Morgan Chase, and my question, I think, is directed mostly at Bill, but kind of in broad to the manufacturing leaders as well. But, you know, as Damon mentioned, he has had to hire some people at above average wages, and we all know that housing continues to be an issue in the area. Bill, where do you kind of see the cost of living in this city going, and where does the supply and demand equilibrium fall?
Well, that is something that I've talked about here at CMC before. It is a big concern of mine. We have been underbuilding housing at least since the 2007-2009 recession, and we are way behind now. We're going to get thousands of new Intel workers, and the indirect jobs that will come along with that. I've done some work on that, and it's looking like something around 3 times the direct jobs. And so we need to crank things up, and we need to crank them up soon. We need housing at all price points. They talk about the $135,000 average salary of Intel. Actually, there will be people in that plant making $40,000 or $50,000. That is not a house in Dublin. That is an apartment in East Columbus.
Yeah, very true. Okay, next.
Hi, I'd also like to thank both CMC and the panelists who have been terrific on this topic. I'm Margie Pizzuti. I'm the happily retired CEO of Goodwill Columbus. And the question I have, and it's probably for Ryan, but others can certainly answer as well. Many of us know Goodwill is rags and bags, but we do a lot to train individuals, both with disabilities and other barriers, on a pathway to economic self-sufficiency through the power of work. There's lots of other nonprofit agencies in Franklin County and throughout the state. I wondered what you're doing to reach out to this sector, because there is a terrific convergence of what many of us are doing in training and what you're doing. So.
Be happy to comment on that. Thank you for the question, Marjorie. So our approach on workforce, and on my infographic, this had to do with alignment, a lot in that slide. But the centerpiece for us on alignment for manufacturing workforce is called the Industry Sector Partnership, the Manufacturing Industry Sector Partnership. Get a group of manufacturers together at a regional basis. Why? Because workforce development is not a top-down statewide solution. It's got to be done locally. It's got to be done regionally. So you get the ISP, you get manufacturers together. They all share the talent problem. They all need to share in the talent solution. So then you identify all these different tools, all these different populations. Goodwill Industries is a partner in most of our industry sector partnerships. We have 13 industry sector partnerships around the state. The one here in Central Ohio is called COMP, Central Ohio Manufacturing Partnership. Goodwill is absolutely a partner in that. It's up to the manufacturers, though, in that ISP to prioritize which population are we going to go after first, which 3 or 4 things are we going to do this year, because you can't boil the ocean. But Goodwill is already a very active partner with the manufacturing industry sector partnerships across the state. And there are many other organizations. It's not just talent, as was alluded to earlier. It's housing, it's transportation, it's social services, hunger security. All these issues are important to providing a workforce, because there's a wide range of manufacturing employment. In general, they're family-sustaining jobs, but certainly some are more lucrative than others.
I Appreciate that, and I wasn't trying to tout Goodwill. I was trying to tout the entire sector, and there is a human service chamber of Franklin County representing 200 nonprofit health and human service agencies that could tap into Central Ohio. So thank you so much.
Just maybe I could add a little bit onto that.
Sure.
For my organization in particular, one of our customers is actually the Central Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired. So this is an organization that tries to help employ people with visual disabilities. And our organization in particular has looked at this as another area where we can, potentially find people. And we're actually employing visually impaired people in our facility and actually look for roles that disabled or visually impaired people can perform in our facility.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave.
Hi, I'm Laura Fish. I'm with Applegate Talent Strategies, and I've worked in this space for about the last 30 years, and historically what I've seen is that businesses are really good at working with the workforce system in talent acquisition and getting all the feelers out and doing all of those things, but when we get to job retention, that really poses for a lot of businesses a challenge. So one of the things we've seen in the last year is big burnout with recruiters because the hiring at some businesses has become like a sieve. They hire someone, they walk out the door not too long after. So my question is, how high of a priority is it for you personally, really all of you, each of you, to retain those workers, and what are you doing to upskill your individual leaders to take a part in improving your job retention, if that's an issue? Maybe some of you not, and then I want to know what you're doing that's so great.
Danielle, anything?
Well, I can go. Oh, I wish it was not a problem, but yeah, it is a problem, and we work together with not just acquisition, but also the retention. And we try to continue to develop our employees and promote them to different roles as we can. As I mentioned, a couple partnerships that we have and opportunities that we have to promote within, we always try. We try to make some fun as well, even though manufacturing can be not fun, but we, like this Friday, we have a cookout. Actually, it's not a cookout anymore. Used to be, we used to grill burgers, the leadership burgers for the employees. Now we do food trucks. Since you have such a diverse workforce, so we have different type of food trucks. We have games. Try to do some of those parties a couple times a year, but also try to hear our employees and kind of like come some of ideas of improvement so they can feel they are part of the organization and other engagement activities throughout the year. There's a couple of things.
Anything?
Yeah, I think again, every organization is probably different. I mean, we have the benefit of being a young, fresh organization that's growing, so therefore that creates a lot of opportunity, and I think that's been one of the primary drivers for us. So obviously, I think from a compensation standpoint, we do well. We obviously hold a lot of employee events. We like to get the families engaged. But if we take a look at a lot of the people who joined our organization, say 6 months ago, about 25% of those people have been promoted or in upper level roles, and so I think people see that, hey, if I come in here and I stay focused and I do my job, I've got a career path. And I think that's one of the biggest things I think we offer, and why we maybe not had so much of a challenge around this, is that having career paths for our people is very important. And that's one of the things we educate people on when they come here is, hey, what is it you want to do? And let's see if we can get you in a role that lets you have a career path that may get you into something interesting. We've had people that came in as, say, like packaging operators that are now QC technicians or maybe analytical technicians in our lab. So this has been, I think, a big motivator for people because they've seen their peers be able to get more opportunities, and this has been a big help in our retention.
Okay. We have time for one more question.
Okay, thank you.
Gene Krebs, former many things. My question is, what has been the surprising impact on manufacturing of electrical and other utility costs and reliability in this state? Thank you.
Ryan?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. You can't run a factory without reliable electricity and other energy inputs. We have had several, we're an advocacy organization. We care about the structural costs, and electricity is governed by state of Ohio law and regulation more than it is by the federal government. So state by state, you have different solutions to the way electricity is priced. We've had some concerns in Ohio. The ongoing House Bill 6 saga is indicative of that. So we need affordable, reliable electricity, other utilities as well. They're important for manufacturers. We, as a association representing manufacturers, are going to continue demanding for better affordability and better transparency and pricing of electricity. A lot of interesting public policy questions spiral out of it, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, I wish we had more time, but it was time to wrap up, so I'm going to turn it back to Carrie Schmidt for concluding remarks. Carrie.
Thank you. That was great discussion. I have to say, this was personal to me. My father spent his career in manufactured goods, and it provided me the opportunity, while home from college, to work on one of those factory floors. So it's kind of good to hear where the industry is today. I hope you all enjoyed it as well. We really thank you all for making time, for being here, for joining us on the live streaming. Thank you to Grange Insurance Audubon Center for hosting us today, our virtual seat patrons, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and of course the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's live stream. A very special appreciation to today's speakers, Ryan Augsburger, Bill Lafayette, Damon Richardson, Daniela Vilasa, sorry about that, and our host, Doug Buchanan. All right, good job. All right, let's do it again next week. So next week we will have another forum. The topic is preserving intellectual freedom in public libraries. It'll be right here again at the center. Also, please take a moment to answer the short survey that's in your forum flyers. And again, thank you for being here. We couldn't do these conversations without you being here. Thanks so much.